Hi, this is Mr. Conroy and Mr. Igelkey here to help you with writing a couple of the paragraphs. According to the rubric, it says that in paragraph 4 we have to identify patterns and trends, and then suggest some reasons for the patterns and trends using scientific concepts. So far, we've talked about things like mass, kinetic energy, potential energy, friction. And so going back, what we are going to do is, if this is the case for you, looking at your data table, you might say, there is a pattern in my data. As the mass increased, then so did the kinetic energy. Then you're going to go into the reason. The reason for this trend is that the equation for kinetic energy is, then you can put in the equation and then talk about, therefore, according to the equation, if the mass increases, then so should the kinetic energy. Then you want to talk about what the definitions are. Mass is, and then give that definition. This is important to know because in our experiment we changed the mass of our roller coaster. Kinetic energy is then the definition, the equation, and then the next thing you may want to talk about is any differences in our data could be linked to different amounts of friction. The friction could be different. For each mass because, and then you want to think about, like, if you rub your hands together softly versus hard, you can feel different amounts of heat with that. So how would the wooden marble compare to the brass marble on that foam track? So you could talk about that. So according to the rubric, then we've talked about patterns and identified reasons for the patterns and talked about scientific concepts. Next, we got paragraph 5. We have to restate the hypothesis, say if it's supported or not, and then use some data. So going back to our marble write-up, our first statement is going to want to be, my hypothesis is the second thing you want to say is, my hypothesis is supported or not supported. And then finally, you want to talk about the data. For example, you might say, looking at your data, when the mass of the marble was the kinetic energy was and then talk, so that's the control, And then you're going to want to talk about when I increased the mass to whatever the acrylic marble is, then the kinetic energy increased. Now if you're doing the percent change, you would put your percent changes in here. If you go to the Google Classroom and there's a link there that talks about how to do a percent change. So you put the percentages in here, and then finally the last thing you want to compare is when you increased the mass. Now we're talking about the solid brass marble to so many grams, then the kinetic energy increased. Therefore, my hypothesis is supported, or maybe it's not supported. So looking back at the rubric, we restate our hypothesis, we made a claim statement that was supported or not, and then we used the data from the graph or the data table. Paragraph 6, what's one source of error, and then suggest at least one relevant experimental design revision or further investigation based on the data analysis. So would you use the foam track again? Would you want a different type of material? Was this a valid experiment? I guess it's not, is it a valid experiment? It is, what would you do to make the experiment better? You can never say have more money or have more time. That is not a relevant design change. All right, I hope this is helpful. Have fun. And again, this is just me modeling like how this would flow. You are all your own writers. So beg, borrow, and steal from what I put up here, and have fun. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.